Throughout the 2010s, it felt like most new animated series that aired on TV were mostly comedy shows with 11-minute episodes, especially on Cartoon Network. Traditionally, cartoon channels used to air a combination of half-hour shows and quarter-hour shows, with half-hour shows having episodes around 22 minutes in length and usually falling under the action genre. Quarter-hour shows, on the other hand, are usually comedy cartoons, with their episodes being comprised of two 11-minute segments that air back-to-back. For decades, channels that aired animation had a balanced programming that included a good amount of both of these types of shows. But after the 2010s, they started heavily leaning into the 11-minute format for almost every new show they decided to air, with them even rebooting franchises that firmly stood in the half-hour action show genre and creating new shows with the style of shorter modern cartoons, such as the Ben 10 reboot or Thundercats Roar. Another franchise that went through this was Justice League. Since on 2016, DC, Warner Bros. Animation, and Cartoon Network decided to create a new adaptation of their most iconic superhero team with a cartoon that could cater to modern sensibilities, mainly focusing on capturing a younger audience. And while they could have easily turned this concept into a very over-the-top and exaggerated show with random cringe-inducing humor like many comedy cartoons from this time, Justice League Action actually felt like a project that had a lot of care and thought put into it. It had very respectful adaptations of these comic book characters and simple yet entertaining stories that fans of all ages could honestly enjoy. So today I thought it would be a nice idea to remember this very short-lived series in order to explore both its interesting run and its abrupt cancellation, as well as different rejected ideas and interesting designs that never ended up being used. Justice League Action was mainly produced by Jim Krieg, Butch Lukic, and Alan Burnett, three producers that had already worked on many DC animated projects up until that point, and were very familiar with these characters and their world, something that helped them in envisioning this new iteration of the DC universe and the general style that the show would have. During an interview promoting the show's release on the 2016 San Diego Comic-Con, they mentioned that the decision to have the show be comprised of 11-minute segments was a direct mandate from Warner Bros. But an interesting fact is that, initially, this series wasn't going to be a Justice League show. It was going to be a Batman show instead.
Yeah, basically, originally we were supposed to be doing the new Batman series, but me and Alan got together, and Paul Dini, I think, and then eventually, a week later, it was suggested we do a Justice League show instead, because there was a gap between a new series plus the movie that's going to come out.
This does make sense, considering that the last DC animated show that Warner had produced before they started development on Justice League Action was Beware the Batman, which was also a really short-lived show. And it's a well-known fact that DC tends to prefer creating projects based on Batman since he's their most popular and lucrative character. So it doesn't surprise me if they were considering making a Batman cartoon with an 11-minute format for its episodes. However, this initial idea eventually changed, and they decided to have this new show focus on the Justice League as a way to tie in with the then upcoming release of the live-action Justice League movie. And we all know how that turned out. Besides Jim Krieg, Butch Lukic, and Alan Burnett, the series also brought back many other people who've previously worked on other DC shows and movies, such as writer Paul Dini or many different voice actors, like Diedrich Bader, Tara Strong, Troy Baker, and, most notably, Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy, the most iconic voices for the Joker and Batman. And they all really seem to be having a lot of fun with voicing these characters once again. And there was even a short where Mark Hamill voiced every single character.
You were so busy thinking of Mark Hamill as a celebrity, you forgot that he's also a talented voice actor. What's a voice actor?
This reunion of such talented performers and artists definitely elevated the show's quality, and there's many things to like about the series. The action scenes were honestly very well done. They're fluid, impactful, and with fun choreographies that take advantage of the different fighting styles and powers that all these distinct characters have. The comedy was also entertaining and pretty clever a lot of times. Since they decided not to focus on complex storylines for the show, It allowed them to just have fun with simpler ideas that fit better with their 11-minute format. Episodes like Playdate, which has Toyman forcing the heroes into being used for a fighting game. Forget Me Not, where all of the heroes forget who they are, except for Firestorm. Or Mixie's Mix-Up, which has Mixel-Pitlick switching the Justice League members' bodies with each other and having them panic because they don't know how to use one another's powers. All of these episodes showcase pretty simple yet entertaining concepts that have fun with these different personalities and character dynamics, resulting in one of the show's biggest positives. And again, it can also be legitimately funny at times.
I gotta ask, Plaz, when you change, your clothes change too, so what is it, some unstable atoms?
What's what?
Your uniform.
A what uniform?
So you're saying you're not wearing any... I gotta go!
This show may not have complex stories, and it doesn't really touch on deeper themes, but it does find ways of making small character arcs within its short 11-minute runtime. The episode Time Out is a good example, showing how Batman goes from mistreating Booster Gold and discrediting him because he doesn't think he takes being a superhero seriously, to eventually respecting Booster as a person. After time literally freezes due to a creature called the Chronovore, it's up to Booster Gold to save the day since he has more knowledge about time traveling, showing how Batman changes his mind and comes to respect Booster after realizing that he deals with threats in the time stream that no one ever finds out about, protecting the universe's continuity all on his own. At the end of the episode, Booster has to go back in time to the start of the story in order to save the time stream, undoing what Batman learned about Booster Gold and losing his respect for him. But he still does it because it's the right thing to do, showing that Booster is a far less superficial character than he may seem on the surface.
I was wrong about you. You're a better person than anybody gives you credit for. Maybe one day I'll find that out.
Enigma Consulting Detective is another episode that excels in executing a simple idea and delivering a great episode out of it. It's about a rehabilitated Riddler that's become a private investigator, helping the Justice League in finding Batman after he's been kidnapped. And it's partly inspired by the Paul Dini Detective Comics run from the mid-2000s, where he also wrote about a Riddler that became a detective after leaving Arkham Asylum rehabilitated. In order to juggle all these different characters, the crew decided to just focus on 2 or 3 different heroes each episode, using Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman as the anchor characters of the show, appearing in most episodes they produced, and basically serving as the main protagonists. Although I appreciate how they used many DC characters which hadn't been used that much in animation before, like Swamp Thing and John Constantine, or Constantine, and Space Cabbie, who I honestly didn't even know existed until I watched this cartoon. A lot of episodes also tended to focus on a more experienced hero accompanying a younger character on their first couple missions for the Justice League, such as Stargirl, Firestorm, and Blue Beetle. But overall, the show featured a really expansive lineup of characters. The series ended up lasting from 2016 until 2018, with Cartoon Network originally ordering a batch of 52 11-minute segments to comprise the show's first season. And while it wasn't technically cancelled, CN never renewed the series for a second season, and they didn't give an official statement about the situation. When asked about the lack of news regarding the show's future, Superman's voice actor Jason J. Lewis tweeted that he still hadn't been approached by Warner to record more episodes, but he still had hopes that the series could continue. One big reason why it may have had issues garnering a big enough audience to justify it being renewed was its programming schedule. In the US, the show aired on Saturday mornings at 7 AM, and the only episode that was somewhat promoted was the Shazam Special series premiere, which allegedly reached over 1 million viewers and ratings when it aired, but Cartoon Network didn't really continue promoting the show afterwards. This is supported by a 2019 article from CBR that also explored possible reasons why the series might have been cancelled, since it speculates that the show wasn't a success in Warner Bros. And Cartoon Network's eyes because it didn't achieve the same ratings as Teen Titans Go, and also because of the failure of the 2017 Justice League movie, given that the show was meant to tie in with its release. In general, action cartoons just didn't seem to catch a break during most of the 2010s. This era of Western animation started to vastly prefer making comedy shows rather than action shows. That's the genre that pretty much all of the major cartoon channels leaned into. And it's most likely because the shows that made them the most amount of money during this time were comedy shows. For example, while during the 2000s, Cartoon Network had a massive hit with Ben 10, being the most successful action show that ever aired on the channel and spawning a multimedia franchise that's amassed over $7 billion in revenue since its conception. CN didn't manage to replicate that success with any other action show afterwards. Throughout the 2010s, however, their most successful shows fell into the 11-minute comedy series format, like Adventure Time, The Amazing World of Gumball, Regular Show, Steven Universe, and even DC's very own Teen Titans Go. So the action genre as a whole just wasn't much of a priority for CN, something that maybe also played a part in why Justice League Action didn't get much support from the channel, even though they were trying to fit in with its current lineup and style of cartoons. Now that we went over the cancellation, let's discuss some interesting designs and characters that never had the chance to appear on the series' very short lifespan. If you watched the show, you might recall that Hawkman had a bit of a different look when compared to how he's usually portrayed, since they didn't have him use his traditional Hawk helmet with the two little wings to the side of his head, opting for a more traditional mask similar to how Qatar Hall used to look on his first appearances in the comics during the Silver Age. However, character designer for the show Shane Glines has shared a number of unused designs, such as this original concept art for Hawkman that more closely resembles his usual look, using a helmet with wings. And I honestly would have preferred if they had used this costume for the series instead of the one they went with. Overall, Glines did a great job with designing the show's characters and the general aesthetic of its world. It has a style somewhat similar to the DCAU's more angular art style, albeit a bit more simplified, and it really suits the more lighthearted tone that the series was going for. Most characters that made appearances were portrayed pretty faithfully to how they look in the comics, and they did a great job in respecting their source material and using elements from many different eras of DC Comics. One thing they lifted from the New 52 era, and something that I don't really like from the show, is Superman and Wonder Woman being in a relationship. An idea that already had happened in the comics before the New 52, like in Elseworld stories such as Kingdom Come, but it just never feels right whenever they do it. In this show, luckily, they don't focus on it that much, given that the series wasn't interested in exploring the characters' relationships or giving them meaningful developments. But it's still something that distracts you whenever they address it, and them being in a relationship didn't really add anything onto the stories. Speaking of Wonder Woman though, take a look at this unused design with a somewhat punk hairstyle. I honestly don't really like it, but it is pretty interesting that they considered having Wonder Woman look like this on the show. Toyman was almost portrayed with a doll design, much like how he appeared on the DCAU, with these concept art by Shane Glines revealing that he thought it would be creepy to have an adult's voice coming out of this childlike doll, envisioning him as a cross between Pee Wee Herman and Astro Boy. In the end, they chose to adapt the Hiro Okamura version of the character as a very short kid genius. Glines also shared unused designs for Mr. Freeze, and another unused villain design for Star Sapphire, showing her with a much more revealing outfit. You know, that's pretty normal for her in the comics, but it isn't something that I'd expect to see on a show for young kids. An interesting fact about Star Sapphire is that she never ended up appearing on an episode of the show itself, much like Cheetah, who also only appeared during a 3-minute short. But hey, at least Star Sapphire and Cheetah were actually used for something, since there were some characters who were never used at all, even though they already had designs in the show style. There were 3 villains, Captain Cold, Dr. Light, and Reverse Flash, who showed up during the series intro, but they were never used on any short or episode during the entire series run. Similarly, Black Canary did appear on an episode of the show, but only for a non-speaking cameo. She was essentially a background character. Batgirl, on the other hand, never ended up appearing on either the show or its web shorts, but she had a design made for her as promotional art for a collaboration with McDonald's Happy Meals. so it is very likely that they did consider using her for the series. Aquaman also never appeared on the show, but he was used for a tie-in mobile game titled Justice League Action Run. Related to this, in the episode Galaxy Jest, the Joker does briefly mention Aquaman.
Pick a card. Any card. Yeah, Aquaman doesn't care for that one either.
Storyboard artist and animator Jay Baker also revealed another unused character when he posted a short animatic featuring Clayface fighting against Batman, and it seemingly stems from a planned episode that was ultimately rejected.
Easy peasy.
In the end, while the show wasn't a massive success, it was still legitimately good, and I appreciate how DC often tries to create adaptations that are appropriate for all ages and that kids can enjoy. In my personal opinion, it will always be important to have comic book shows and movies mainly targeted towards kids, since it helps in cultivating the next generation of fans. I've said it before on the channel, but I think that animation is the best medium to adapt to comic books, serving as a great entry point into these worlds. And I know this because it's how I got into both Marvel and DC as a kid. I was so enthralled by their animated shows that it made me interested in their comics, and I started reading them. Another thing is that comic books are pretty expensive. Nowadays they're a bit more accessible with stuff like comic streaming services, but when I was a kid, my family didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't get to read that many comic books growing up. My main exposure by far were the animated shows. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I really got the means and my own money to get access to comics myself. Most kids don't really have the money to get into the hobby that easily, so animated shows serve as a fantastic way to capture new fans. And I just think it's a shame that a lot of current superhero and comic media seems to be mainly designed for adults. So projects that treat their young audience with respect and attempt to be genuinely good adaptations such as Justice League Action or Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur from Marvel hold a really special place in the current landscape of comic book adaptations. And I think both DC and Marvel should always have offerings that fans of every age group can enjoy. So, besides all this cartoon talk, this will probably be my last video of 2025. So I also wanted to thank you guys so much for all the support that this channel's been getting. There's been a lot of growth this year, and I plan to keep growing the channel even more. I already have many great videos planned out for you guys, and it's genuinely so satisfying to know that y'all enjoy these videos. One thing that I wish for the future is to be able to focus on YouTube full-time one day, and be able to create all of the dozens of video ideas that I have in my head. And with every like, comment, subscription, and general support that you guys give me, we get closer to that each and every day, and I'm really grateful. But hey, now I want to know, what did you think about Justice League Action? Did you manage to catch it during the short time that Cartoon Network aired it? Would you have liked to see it continue? Please, share your thoughts in the comments below. And, as always, thank you so much. I wish you all happy holidays and a fantastic start to this new year. Till next time.